Hey Canonites, welcome back. At this point, I think we're about done with any new Halo Infinite news, but there's one last thing I'd like to talk about this week, and that's the overall story for Halo Infinite. Obviously, we can't even begin to realistically guess at specifics, but there are a few points I'd like to discuss in the wake of yesterday's Inside Xbox episode with Chris Lee, along with a few other things I didn't think to bring up or dive into too deeply in my trailer breakdown. So, I hope you're ready for another dive into Halo Infinite before probably another year of minimal details and news. So, as revealed by Chris Lee on Monday, the trailer we saw is more or less the opening cinematic to Halo Infinite. To quote, "The briefing was the opening sequence to our campaign with Master Chief." Now, I can imagine that some things might change in the final version, like maybe we will get a classic look-around sequence to test controls and whatnot. What I'm really curious about, however, is whether we can expect any sort of prologue prior to this. Yes, Chris did say it's the opening sequence, but the same was said about the Halo 5 cinematic with Osiris doing a Halo drop. It's the opening to the campaign, but it was still preceded by a prologue cinematic. So, there could be some kind of prologue, and if there is, I really hope it uses the Mark 6 mod from Halo 4 and 5. Give my baby a proper send-off, show it getting beat up before it has to be replaced. But more importantly, I do think that a prologue would be a good way to get new people primed for what's to come, and perhaps give us a few details on the state of the universe in the 3 to 4 years since the end of Halo 5. The Chief reawakening sequence closes with something bathing the Pelican in a white-blue light, which is most likely a Guardian. I imagine at this point, even after all these years, Cortana is still trying to capture John, still intent on showing him her galaxy at peace. We'll see though. Another point that Chris Lee brought up was everyone's favorite pilot. Prior to finding the Master Chief, this currently unnamed pilot was at his lowest low, as Lee put it, breathing his last breaths. But then he finds the Chief. According to Lee, 343 wants to connect fans to this pilot in a deep way. It's a bit of an extrapolation, but I can't help but wonder if this pilot will take on something of a guy-in-the-chair role in the campaign, an almost Cortana-esque presence, if you will. In other words, he might be present to bring a human element to the game like Cortana did for Chief in the Bungie-era games. To note, she did this in Halo 4 as well, but in a fundamentally different manner, which is why I left it out there. Or if not like Cortana, then maybe something more akin to Johnson, primarily in Halo 3, but also in Halo 2. After the premiere of the Halo Infinite announcement trailer last year, speculation went wild with ideas about Halo Infinite being open world or featuring large open play spaces with lots to explore. There have even been suggestions of a hub world like ODST had, from which players could launch campaign missions. If any of these ideas sound remotely accurate, or even if Infinite is a more traditional linear game, what if the unknown pilot were key in transporting the Master Chief around the Halo ring? We'll see, but that would be a good way to get players to connect with him, perhaps even help Chief open up as part of his continued journey to rediscover his humanity. And quickly before we move on, let me issue a correction on my trailer breakdown from Monday. I was completely off about how long the pilot had been stranded in his Pelican. Nowhere near a year, like I said. I don't know how I convinced myself of that, but we're probably looking at something more like 2 to 4 months, not a year of drifting through space or searching through space, whatever it is. So, sorry about that, let's move on. On the subject of open world and exploration, these are elements commonly associated with RPGs. Interestingly, in December of 2018, a listing on Microsoft's career page was looking for a senior systems designer for Halo Infinite. Notably, the requirements included familiarity with RPG and shooter game mechanics. There were also leaks back in February from a man named Brad Sams that pointed to RPG elements in Halo Infinite. Brad, by the way, leaked the name of Halo Infinite pretty damn close, a day before it was announced in 2018, and also claimed that Infinite would be a Project Scarlet launch title, which we now know it is. So the guy's got a pretty good track record. With that, it almost seems certain that Infinite will include at least some RPG elements, maybe side quests, or perhaps even more outlandish, something like character upgrades. Imagine if you could actually alter the Chief's look, upgrade and modify his Mjolnir armor, maybe even his weapons. I'm not 100% sure if I'm on board with that, but if it's done well, that could add a ton of replayability to the campaign. At the very least though, we know, thanks to Frank O'Connor, that exploration will be rewarded. As I detailed last year, exploration would be a fantastic way to introduce deep lore concepts to the average player, given the history of Installation 07. And speaking of, let's talk about the damage to Zeta Halo. Yes, it hasn't been officially confirmed, but everything points to Zeta Halo, so I'm just going to call it Zeta Halo from here on out. Anyway, in the final scene of the trailer, we can see the Master Chief approaching a holographic display in the center of a control room-like structure, which is replaying the destruction of the ring. Slowing things down, we can see an initial break, something hitting the ring perhaps, either a massive object or something traveling at a high velocity. Then, as the ring rotates, the structure begins to break more, a result of the ring moving, until huge chunks fly off and the ring's rotation stops. When talking about this on Twitter with some other Halo fans, Frank O'Connor jumped in and explained that Halo rings have limited agency over their construction and integrity. So it seems that the ring stopped itself once it started flying apart and is using what systems it has available to hold itself together. I speculated in my trailer breakdown that the ring looked like it was holding itself together with hard light. While I noted that it could be atmosphere or debris of some kind drifting off, I lean more towards the hard light angle, especially now. I'll be curious to see what exactly caused the ring to tear apart. Frank O'Connor went on to say that this was a meaningful moment that would be interesting to discuss post-launch. Did something impact the ring like I just said, or did something else happen here? On the cover of the game, we can see massive chunks of land floating above the ring. Maybe the ring is being disassembled by the UNSC so Cortana wouldn't be able to use it, perhaps with the help of Professor Ellen Anders. And once the superstructure was weak enough, the ring started to tear itself apart before a sort of self-preservation system kicked in. Conversely, maybe Cortana was the one to disassemble the ring to stop the UNSC from doing something that would threaten her plans. The one reason I could see Cortana being the cause of the break is because when the pilot shows the Chief the broken ring, he says, "We lost," as if to imply that there was some hope of fighting back on that ring. A hope lost now that it's broken. This could ultimately go either way though, so yeah. Now speaking of Cortana, let's talk about her role in this control room scene and in the game at large. In this scene, it's noted by Chris Lee that it's a moment of reconnection for the Chief, almost certainly being reconnection with Cortana. That's supported by Cortana's voiceover in the scene. So it would seem that this is the moment Chief runs into Cortana, in the flesh as it were, possibly for the first time in the game. In this moment, Cortana notes how she chose Chief because he was special, ending with the sorrowful "I was right." What could Cortana mean here? Is this a moment in which John tries to kill her? Or might Cortana be preparing to kill John, lamenting that she would have to do so to ensure the integrity of her plan? Or might something else be going on here? I'm not sure I can say, but I do think based on the delivery of her lines in this moment, the confrontation between the two is not going to be a joyous one. Something else I want to discuss is the AI chip. While I'm no closer to deciphering what weapon containment device is supposed to mean, what I find incredibly interesting is, in the 2018 trailer, the chip is aglow, meaning that there was an AI in it, or maybe some other kind of program. Now yes, that trailer was more of a tech demo than a story trailer, more meant to show the power of the Slipspace engine and give us a feel for what Infinite may hold. But I don't think we can simply disregard this scene. The chip is lit up, and when the Chief plugs the chip in, the AI port on his helmet lights up too. Before the Chief ejects the chip in the control room scene, the port is not lit, nor is the chip. But on the cover art for Infinite, the port is aglow. Something is going to be put in that chip. There has been some speculation that Chief and Cortana might be forced to work together against a greater threat, perhaps the return of the Didact, or less likely in my eyes, the return of the Flood. Whatever the case, there is a possibility that the two will have to work together again in some capacity. I can't say I'm too keen on this, especially because of how that could possibly lead to a redemption story for Cortana, which is the last thing I want, but I digress. Alternatively, there's always the possibility of a new Cortana, a new AI created from the cloned mind of Dr. Halsey. Maybe that's who Chief is reconnecting to in this final scene. The new Cortana angle has its roots in Halo 4, where Cortana feared being replaced by a newer model.
They'll pair you with another AI. Maybe even another Cortana model if Halsey lets them.
And it has strong parallels to the story of Mendicant Bias and Offensive Bias, two Forerunner Ancilla or AIs. Mendicant was created as the ultimate tool against the Flood, not unlike how Cortana was created as the ultimate intrusion tool against the Covenant. Mendicant was turned against his creators by a Gravemind after a 43-year conversation, which ended with him forcing himself into rampancy and joining the Flood. In Halo 4, Cortana entered rampancy, and rampant fragments she shed off during that game later came together to make the Cortana we see in Halo 5. Both AI believed they were fulfilling a greater good. In response to Mendicant's betrayal, the Forerunners created Offensive Bias, an AI that wouldn't be able to turn against them. Offensive was ultimately key in holding off Mendicant Bias until the Halo rings were activated. So could a new Cortana have been created to serve an Offensive Bias-like role? That would certainly explain the serial number on the chip. Alternatively, Roland could be playing the Offensive Bias role to Cortana's Mendicant Bias, something that 343 seemed to have been hinting at during and after Halo 5, but things can change over time. Next, let's briefly talk about the Didact and Professor Ellen Anders. Starting with Anders, I've brought her up a few times now. If you recall, the final cutscene of Halo Wars 2 showed her on Installation 09, traveling to the Sol system that once contained Installation 04, only to be intercepted by a Guardian. I'll be shocked if she isn't an Infinite given that ending and the massive time skip. Her exact role I can only guess at, but I could imagine her knowledge of the Halos and experience with other Forerunner megastructures, especially the Ark, would be valuable to the Created and the UNSC. Regarding the Didact, we've gotten hints at a possible return in the years since Halo 5 released. In the Halo Escalation Library Edition commentary from Brian Reed specifically stated that the Didact would return. In addition, the description for the Didact doll in Halo 5's Forge, along with a note in the Halo Adult Coloring Book, heavily implied the Didact, after his composition in Halo Escalation, made his way to the Domain, the same place Cortana resides. Halo 5 itself had Cortana directly quoting the Didact speech from the end of Halo 4.
Our strength shall serve as a luminous sun, toward which all intelligence may blossom, and the impervious shelter beneath which you will prosper.
Our strength is a luminous sun, towards which all intelligence blossoms, and the impervious shelter beneath which it has prospered.
All of this hints at the Didact's return, but again, plans could change. Still, I'm keeping my fingers crossed for the Didact's return. There's so much potential in his character that 343 only barely tapped in Halo 4. Maybe he's the catalyst for Chief and Cortana working together again. Or maybe he'll be the one working with the UNSC against Cortana. Or maybe he'll be a third faction we have to worry about, bringing back the two-enemy dynamic we had with the Flood and Covenant in the original Halo trilogy. Finally, let's talk about Bastion, a location brought up in Halo 5's audio intel. With the way things are looking in Halo Infinite, I have serious doubts about Bastion appearing in this game. It was recently mentioned in Halo Renegades though, so I don't think that storyline has been abandoned just yet. Maybe Intel or Terminals or something else could mention Bastion again, with Bastion being a location we visit in a hypothetical Halo 7. Or maybe 343 will cut the Bastion story out of the games and keep it to the books. Or maybe Bastion will be a secondary location in Infinite and surprise us all, who knows. There are a ton of potential story threads leading into Halo Infinite. It's going to be one hell of a ride, and I can't wait to see what 343 delivers. I'm hoping that Infinite will be the biggest Halo campaign to date, given everything that 343 has available to them. But these are just my thoughts and wishes. What are yours? Let me know in the comments below. I think this is going to be it for Halo Infinite for a while, but until that time, this has been Halo Canon, and I'll see y'all in the next video. Thanks for watching, everyone. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please consider subscribing, and if you really love me, hit that notification bell and leave a thumbs up. These both really help out the channel. I wouldn't be where I am now without your views and support, so once again, thank you. Keep on being awesome, Canonites.